Hello, everyone. I am Tiffany Marley, the Project Director for the Learning Communities Resource Center, and on behalf of the Community Action Partnership, we would like to welcome you to today's webinar, Uplifting the Family, a Two-Generation Approach. I am joined by some wonderful colleagues who are experts as it relates to this topic area within our network. They are Monica Barjak, who is a Senior Policy Advisor for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families. Also, Kayleen Keener from CAP Tulsa, who serves as the Manager of Programs and Family Advancement. Also, regarding Monica Barjak, who I just previously mentioned, Monica is actually on loan from CAP Tulsa in Tulsa, Oklahoma. At CAP Tulsa, she serves as the Director of Innovation at the agency and will just only be serving OCS for this year. In addition, we are joined for this webinar today by Dwayne Yoder, who serves as the President of Garrett County Community Action Committee Incorporated, as well as Paige Teagarden, who is the Vice President for Innovative Strategies at the agency. And so at this time, let us take a moment to learn just a little bit about the Learning Communities Resource Center, which is sponsoring today's webinar as well as the National Webinar Series in general. Really, our purpose is to build a network's capacity around anti-poverty approaches. Ultimately, the heart of who we are as a network, or the heart of what we do, is fighting poverty. And given that OCS has invested through the Learning Communities Resource Center in our effort to provide you with training and technical assistance so that as it relates to fighting poverty for families and communities, you are able to do so more effectively. Here's what Jeannie Chapin had to say about this work. As a network, we must be focused on the right issues to address poverty today. We have to be in tune with these issues and reflect on and create strategies that have impact. So as we think about this whole notion of the National Webinar Series, there are several sessions that we have planned in the upcoming year. There are a couple that we have recently facilitated. All of these will focus on themes related to the specific anti-poverty approaches, and really it's our way to showcase our innovation, our creative approaches that we are taking as a network, to showcase that to ourselves and really the larger human services industry. And so before we proceed, it's important to us that as we think forward as it relates to the dialogue that we will have today about two-generation approaches, that we ground ourselves in the community action promise. And that promise is community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we're dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. And so as we think about our promise as community action, as we think about the fact that as a network we are making some very intentional efforts to invest in those innovative or those promising practices, it makes complete sense that we would be talking about two-generation approaches. And so in particular, community action itself is not necessarily a stranger to 2Gen, as we call it. There have been symbols, or there's been evidence of our involvement in this work for a long time. And here's what I have to say, or here's what we have to say about 2Gen. It's truly about engaging in what we would call a comprehensive service delivery approach that ultimately addresses the family as a whole. And so when we think about 2Gen, it's not just providing services for children alone or in isolation, and it's not just about providing services for parents in isolation or alone, but it's about providing those services, those resources, those supports for families and children at the same time, and ensuring that those services are integrated. And as we think about this, an important aspect of the 2Gen approach is that whole family engagement piece that we'll learn about from our presenters today. And so as I said before, community action has foundations which support the successful implementation of the 2Gen approach, given that we already provide comprehensive services and many of our agencies are even already involved in bundling or integrating services, or given that many of our agencies also run Head Start or early Head Start programs, really we have some interesting profiles that exist that strengthen our ability to do this work effectively and to really be a model for the human services industry as it relates to this work. So we are also pleased today to release and announce a special publication, a practice brief that has been put together by the partnership, which features our presenters today. That practice brief is also called Uplifting the Family, a 2-Generation Approach, and it features CAP Tulsa from Oklahoma, as well as Garrett County Community Action Committee from Maryland. And so we invite you at the conclusion of today's webinar to take a look at that publication and certainly utilize it as a resource as your agency thinks about how it would like to do this work. The final point that I will make before we enter into our presentation today is that the Learning Communities Resource Center has several learning community groups, and the way in which we have given special attention to this whole notion of 2-generation approaches for alleviating poverty has been through our bundling services to improve outcomes learning community group, which is actually headed up by Dwayne Yoder and Paige Teagarden, who are presenting today. And additionally, we have an opportunity to work with the White House Rural Council on a project called Rural Impact, which specifically focuses on the 2-generation approach in rural and tribal communities, and Monica Barjak has played a vital role in providing leadership with that. And so without further ado, today's presentation will provide us with an overview of the 2Gen model. We will have an opportunity to hear the CAP Tulsa 2Gen story, and then we'll also have an opportunity to hear Garrett's 2-generation story, and at the conclusion, we will have an opportunity to engage in a bit of conversation or dialogue. What we ask is if you have any questions regarding anything that is being shared during today's webinar, that you use that question and answer box to raise your questions, and feel free to raise them as you go, because to the extent that we can integrate those into our conversation as we go, we will, but ultimately we will address those at the conclusion of today's webinar. So thank you for your attention, and I have already introduced our speakers, but the first up to speak for us today is Monica Barjak, who is the Senior Advisor, as I said, from the Administration for Children and Families, and she'll be followed by her colleague, Kayleen Keener, the Manager of Programs at CAP Tulsa, and then they will be followed by Dwayne Yoder from Garrett County Community Action Committee, and Paige Teagarden will interject into Dwayne's presentation. And previously I mentioned Paige as I should have said she's the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives. And so without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton on to my colleague, Monica Barjack. Monica?
Thank you, Tiffany, and thank you so much for setting the context and hosting and organizing this webinar today, which I feel is very important. And I think for some of you, sort of two-generation is a familiar topic, and for some of you, it may be a less familiar topic. So I'll do my best to kind of serve both of those purposes, and hopefully even if you are well-versed in two-gen, you'll hear something new today, and certainly the stories of CAP Tulsa and Garrett County are always exciting. Okay. So I want to set a little bit of context by presenting some statistics that I'm sure are not unfamiliar to you. But, you know, the reason I think that we get into the business and are really thinking about new ways to deal with poverty is the fact that poverty continues to persist. And just if you think about children in poverty in this country, there are about 15 million children under the age of 18 in families that have incomes under the poverty level. And as all of you who work with families know, it is even a struggle to get by if a family is over the official federal poverty guidelines. So if you look at families that might be considered low income, there are almost double the number then, 31 million children living in families under 200% of the federal poverty line. So the challenge is tremendous. There are many programs that deal with adults in poverty or children in poverty, and I think while some programs do work to pull some children out of poverty, and some programs do work to pull some adults out of poverty, the promise of two-generation approach is to harness the mutual motivation of the child and the parent improving together to get larger and longer lasting, more sustainable outcomes. And so the key under this approach is that we, the service providers and programs, try to make it easier for families to do this by designing the programs to work better together, rather than making the family weave the programs together by going from this office to that office and turning in the same information multiple times. And sometimes, even within a single agency, like a community action agency, for example, one agency providing multiple programs may have all of those programs operating somewhat independently. And so even though the family goes to the same building or different buildings of the same agency, there still are very siloed approaches where the family submits the same information multiple times. So a two-gen approach can be sort of aligning and integrating programs within a single service provider or across service providers. So the goal of a two-generation approach, of course, is not just to do a two-generation approach, but to create better outcomes for families. And this slide just presents some sort of sample outcomes. There's really no kind of agreement or magic set of what two-generation outcomes are. But everyone in the field does agree that what two-generation programs do is consider and track and look at outcomes for children, for parents, and for the family as a whole. And I did want to flag there was a working group put together by Ascend at the Aspen Institute to sort of grapple with this notion of two-generation outcomes. And just recently, they released a report called Making Tomorrow Better Together. And that is accessible online. If you Googled Ascend or Making Tomorrow Better Together, you would find the working group's efforts at trying to plant some stakes in the ground about two-generation outcomes and measurement. So here's a picture that I think some of you have probably seen a few times, and it's just sort of one nice visual way to think about two-generation approaches. So in the model here, you might offer a program that really is child-focused there on the far left side, and weave in or bring in components that are related to the parents. There may also be programs that are really parent-focused on the right side, and those programs begin to bring in and consider programs that serve the children of those parents. But ultimately, program design takes place for the benefit of the whole family, where the service providers are asking jointly together, how can we best meet the needs of children and their parents together? And I would say another key stakeholder in the model are the families themselves. So really ultimately at the design table to have the child-centered services, the parent-centered services, and families all sort of working on this together is really ultimately the ideal. It's important to sort of recognize, because this can feel really overwhelming, like, oh my gosh, we do this, we can't possibly think about doing, you know, items 6, 7, and 8. That 2Gen is really an approach. It's a new way to do business. It's certainly not saying that any single program has to do it all, or that you have to run off and build a bunch of new programs that you're not currently offering. All it really is asking is to put this burden of aligning programs onto the systems and the policies and take it off the back of the families. So there's a lot of partnering that goes on. I mean, sometimes a 2Gen program might build a service and develop something new, but sometimes it might partner or even contract with another service provider and just work really closely on that intentional linkage. That's what makes 2Generation different. Is the intentional linking, and the quality of services is critically important, because if you link sort of average services together, you're not going to get the outcomes. This is, again, just a sample set of what kinds of services might be comprised in a 2Generation approach. There really is no magic formula again. I would say that within the field, there's general agreement that the economic security of the family matters a lot, so that's why employment and asset building are often components of 2Generation approaches, and the education that's required to get parents employed, but also education of the parent and the child together. But of course, we know other things matter too. Parent-child relationship is critically important to a child's development, the health and well-being of the parent, child nutrition, and mental health. So what I really want to emphasize here is a little bit less the specific services and more that chain in the middle, linking the services, stepping beyond referral. And I'll be giving some examples in a second, but it's really about engaging that child and parent at something simultaneously, and perhaps even weaving similar content through both interventions. So for example, a parent intervention and the child intervention might both include some kind of content about routines, so that children are working on routines, parents are working on routines at the same time. And social capital is a critical component underlying all 2Generation work. This is sort of how programs build in ways for families to support each other. So if you think about your own social network and how your social network helps you get by, it's really important. You have people who help you when you need a hand, when you're stuck, and you have network connections to people that you might not necessarily be close to, but they have access to resources that you don't, say a job referral or something like that. And I'm not saying that low-income families lack social capital altogether, although some low-income families are quite isolated. What I'm saying is that when programs think about this as a design element and can build in these opportunities for families to generate social capital, they're likely going to be able to help families achieve better outcomes. This next slide's a little overwhelming. I'm not going to dwell on it, but what I really want to say is that the concept of 2Generation is not a new concept. It's not sort of the newest, latest thing. Head Start is probably one of the most often mentioned examples of sort of an original 2Generation approach in thinking about services for the child and how to build the capacity of the parents. The term 2Gen was sort of created in the 90s, and there were a lot of programs, I think, that sort of attempted to serve children and parents together, but just didn't quite pull that off in a successful way. And the research evaluations of some of the programs during these decades, I think, sort of backs up that they were just not very successful programs. And then, of course, welfare reform sort of really put a focus more on work. That sort of took over attention in terms of 2Gen until philanthropists really started catalyzing a new interest in thinking about how their investments in early childhood might sort of produce stronger outcomes or be protected. And so the difference in this, what some people are calling 2Gen 2.0, is a greater attention to what are the characteristics of the program or the approach that are likely necessary for success. And I would say there's sort of a general sense of agreement that the programs need to make these intentional linkages I've been describing with intensive services for children and parents and high-quality services for children and parents. So I just want to sort of set a little bit of the environment for kind of how 2Gen is blossoming in many places. So one place is in the federal government. As Tiffany mentioned, there are several federal departments and offices putting resources into sponsoring the Rural Impact Demonstration, which is 10 rural communities around the country engaged in developing and implementing 2-generation approaches in the rural context. The Department of Labor recently released a grant opportunity to do a 2-generation approach to help parents secure employment and child care at the same time. That opportunity is now closed, and teams are looking at the application. The President's proposed budget for fiscal year 17 has several 2-generation pieces in it. A proposal for $100 million for TANF 2-generation demonstrations, more money out of the Department of Agriculture to support rural 2-gen poverty demonstrations, and a sort of family, child, parent, literacy and project-based opportunity for schools run by the Bureau of Indian Education. And currently ongoing within the Office of Family Assistance, which is the office that runs TANF, there are 8 states participating in a policy academy. 4 of them are focusing specifically on 2-generation approaches, and they're receiving technical assistance from the federal government to try to push those forwards in their state. These are some of the states that are actually doing 2-generation work at the state level. So in Connecticut, legislation was passed to create 6 pilot communities. And those pilot projects are just getting started. They are very intentionally 2-generation. They have to have many elements to support children, parents, and families as a whole. In Utah, through their TANF program, they are focusing on adult heads of household that receive TANF cash assistance and also received it as a child and are bringing 2-generation services to those families. And in Washington, they are working through their TANF system to bring home visiting programs to TANF recipients who are pregnant or have an infant to really bring a parent-child relationship focus to that work. It helps the TANF staff sort of really see the importance of parent-child relationship and the important role of the parent as a caregiver and not just a breadwinner. And then again, this sort of started among funders, and here are some of the major funders that are supporting what you might call kind of demonstration efforts. The Annie E. Casey Foundation has the program there with 4 sites. They're just wrapping up their 3rd year of that effort. They have another one that's more community-focused. W.K. Kellogg's Foundation last year started a 7-site demonstration program that started focusing on employment services and building child services into that. And the Buffett Foundation supporting 4 educators doing a peer learning community in 2Gen. So really a lot of momentum from a variety of different stakeholders in 2Gen. I believe we have a poll question in a second for you, but before we get to that, I just want to say that after you respond to this, you'll hear from 2 community action agencies doing some of the most advanced 2Gen work in the nation. And I want to caution, this is a little bit of a caution, that both of these programs have been working for years on their model. They've been really pushing the organizational and cultural changes necessary to make the work successful, and you don't get to where they are overnight. But I think and I hope that each organization would say that the effort has been worth it, and they're starting to see outcomes that they were hoping to see, and that they hope will be borne out by ongoing research, and that ongoing research will reinforce the commitment to two-generation work. But it is a process. It's not an overnight thing. And so with that in mind, here's your first poll question. If you could just respond to how ready your agency is to do two-gen. Either we've not previously discussed it, we're thinking about it, we've already begun making changes, or we're fully engaged in the model. And I think, Tiffany, do we have a time to close the poll and see the results?
The poll has now closed, and we are preparing to show you the results in just a few seconds here. And here they are, Monica.
Okay, so I'm not sure if everyone can see it, but I think I can see it. And it looks like, you can see it?
Yes.
Maybe I need to advance it. No. Okay. Can you say the results then? Because I can't really see the slide.
Yes, the participants can see the results, and so are you needing for us to just tell you in general what the outcomes are from the survey?
Well, I was going to make some kind of witty observation about the results, but since I can't see them, I can't do that, and so we can go ahead maybe and just move on to Kayleen at CAP Tulsa.
Here's what I can let us know, and that is that 71 participants responded, and 5 out of 71 said that their agency has not previously discussed the model. 17 out of 71 said that they're thinking about it. 10 out of 71 says that their agency has begun making changes. And then 36 out of 71 says that they're fully engaged in implementing a two-generational model. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. It was 3 out of 71. I apologize. I didn't read that. So, sounds like Monica, maybe.
Okay, so
yes.
So opportunity to move forward with two-gen, and I think that CAP and Garrett County are going to have some good ideas to draw from. And with that, Kayleen?
Thank you, Monica. This is Kayleen Keener again. I'm with CAP Tulsa here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I wanted to share a little bit about our program and the way we deliver our two-generation strategies to our families. So CAP Tulsa's approach is a very parent and child-driven approach. All families who are enrolled in center-based early childhood education with CAP or one of our Learning at Home programs can participate in our adult programs as well. That's approximately 2,000 families in Tulsa County alone that are served through the early education component, and then those parents of those families are eligible for our adult programs. Our first contact with a family is typically based on their desire to access services for their child. So as they apply for early childhood slot within our education system, they will begin to be exposed to our two-generation model and the other services that are available for the entire family. Our ultimate goal is that all families receive two-generation services. We understand, and I think you all do as well, that the impact is exponential in terms of what we can do for families if we're serving both the adult and the child. So this slide shows a little bit better visual of our services that we offer here at CAP. And on the left green slide or block, you'll see that's the programs that are provided through early childhood. Those are the programs that are available to the children within our CAP agency. So our state-of-the-art early learning education centers, our highly qualified and certified instructors, evidence-based curriculum, health, nutrition, disability, mental health support staff are also available to all of our children, as well as programs that incorporate dual language learning children. And then on the adult side, over on the blue box, you'll see programs that are available for parents of any child that is in one of our early childhood programs. These adult programs include things like parenting classes, including our program called Incredible Years and Abriendo Puertas, which is our Spanish language program for parenting. We have family support specialists, which are provided for us through a contract we have with an organization called Family and Children Services that provides sort of the mental health and other emergency service type support services that families may need during their time with us. We have a Career Advance program, which right now is a healthcare-focused training program, training and employment program available to parents of those early childhood children. We have an English language learner program, or an ESL program, that's available to parents. Financial coaching that's also available, especially if they're part of our Career Advance or our ESL program. And a program called Healthy Women, Healthy Futures, which is a partnership with the University of Oklahoma College of Nursing that provides sort of a fun way of learning health and promoting health within the families that's taught by nurses that are at our ECP site. And then as you can see below, of course, the combination of those two has a huge impact, in fact, an exponential impact on the families that we serve. And our data that we'll talk about a little bit later in the slides is showing the increased outcomes for the entire family. And you can see a list of those characteristics that we see improved for the entire family in the purple box there at the bottom. Some of the partners we work with are Family and Children Services that I described. They provide our family support specialists that are available at the site for parents of children that are at our early education sites. And then we also have a specific family support specialist that's allocated to our Career Advance program and our ESL programs that are for the adult side, because sometimes accessing education presents more barriers, and our specific FSS staff can work with them. We partner with Tulsa Community College and Tulsa Technology Center to provide our certification or academic level classes for our adult parents. We work with Union Public Schools as well as 3 other local school districts related to the information that we get on the child attending those schools, but specifically with Union, we partner with them in their adult ed and their ESL services to provide adult education and ESL services to the family of our CAP families. So as you can see, that's an example like Monica was discussing, where it doesn't necessarily have to be us providing the service. We may rely on and partner, and we just highly integrate and incorporate those programs and embed them in the services that are provided to both the families and the children. We partner with Workforce Tulsa and Madison Strategies Group. Those are 2 organizations that focus on employment placement. We are furthering our partnership with Madison Strategies in particular as we move into new funding for our healthcare training programs. And then additionally with the University of Oklahoma College of Nursing on our Healthy Families, Healthy Children program. So two-generation appearance, so what does two-generation look like as a family? As a family comes into CAP, they will see a two-generation message infused in all of the marketing and recruiting materials that they see. We communicate goals through our, you can see our family handbook, our family success plan, and different mechanisms and tools that the parents will see We have goals that we communicate around their children entering school and being prepared for success, their families creating a nurturing and secure environment for their children, and families that are connected to one another in order that social capital component. We also have a two-generation message embedded in our intake enrollment process. So as a family may come to apply for our early childhood slot at CAP, they're also presented programs and services that are available also to the parents. And then additionally in our family handbook that every family receives, there is a list and explanation of all of the programs that are available for both the adults and the children in order to increase the success of the entire family. We have specific programs discussed through our Family Success Plan. This is a component that's kind of hard to explain, but I'll take a stab at it. Our Family and Children's Services partner offer us family support specialists that are embedded in our schools and within our adult programs. In those programs, every family sets goals associated with what their family specifically wants to accomplish while they're in either early childhood or adult programs with us. And within those plans, they will have opportunities to discuss and sort of talk through programs that might be best fit to them based on their goals. This is one of the more specific ways that we get referrals to our adult programs from our early childhood parents. And then we also have specific program elements embedded in our adult programming that parallels the early childhood elements, which I'm going to break down a little bit further. This is how we embed our early childhood components into our adult programs that I manage in particular. So this one's really important to me. We intend to or attempt to build upon natural connections that are already occurring for the families. So if their child is attending in an early childhood site and their parent is attending in either Career Advance or ESL or our Financial Capabilities programs or one of our adult education programs, we partner between the two groups within the organization. Our Family Advancement staff and our Curriculum and Instruction staff meet regularly to discuss different ideas of how we will deliver a program or what strategies we'll use to embed in our adult and our child programs in order to make sure they're very parallel to each other. So the bullet points here discuss or sort of lay out the examples of those types of things that are in both the early education and the adult programming. So as a child may be learning about stress management in their classroom, as they may be dealing with, let's say, change at home or change at the school, the staff may be working with them on specific strategies to deal with stress. At the same time, we may be working with the adult in our adult education programs to deal with stress as it relates to them becoming more accustomed to a change in their schedule, perhaps, or stress that's going on at home. That's just one example, and I'll dive a little bit further into this as we look at how we deliver that message. So in our adult programs, we have a component called partner meetings, and these partner meetings are meetings that we have within the same cohort of students that also have children on our early childhood sites while they're attending a class, typically a health-related education class with us in our Career Advanced program or our ESL programs. So their child is in the classroom while they're in class. They are all meeting together while they go to class, and then additionally we have a once-a-month frequency of a partner meeting that's intended for those members within that same cohort to share information and learn concepts that parallel their child's learning. So this is how we embed those two-generation components into their education. Like I said, this is a monthly frequency, some a little bit more often, some a little less often, and then if they need specific support while they're in it, we can add even more. Some examples are below there. Those are specific to our partner meeting content. We do a partner meeting that goes over managing change or transitions, and of course you can imagine that works perfectly, let's say, at the beginning of a semester, which also may be about the time that the child's going back to school. And so we talk about changes in schedules and how to create a schedule that works better for everybody, that can increase the chances they get to bed on time, that they wake up at the same amount of time, that they've prepared their lunches maybe the night before, and things like that. Different techniques that we can use to help them deal with managing those transitions or their time as they get ready to embark on that new change. Another example is specific to our ESL program. Our ESL program is a little bit different from our Career Advanced program in that the primary focus of this program is to teach our parents everyday English skills. This is specifically not intended to prepare them for school or for work. What we found from our participants, because we rely on them to determine what they most want to learn, is that what was most important to someone first learning English that are parents of our early childhood program children was that they learn how to have everyday conversation so that they can perhaps have a conversation about their child's progress in school or schedule a doctor's appointment for themselves or their child and be successful doing that in English without having to have a translator or in most cases use their child as a translator. Additionally, we provide in that class the actual content for the ESL education relies heavily on forms and processes and conversations that they'll have in that environment, including forms that we use in our early childhood environment. So they're actually getting help completing potentially the forms that their child needs to turn in class. So there's an immediate value that parallels and connects the two programs to each other, which I think is one of the most beautiful components of our ESL program, is how easy it translates to our childhood environment. So this slide goes over a specific alignment and activity that's done in our ESL class. It's a specific alignment with the gold objectives. The gold objectives is the curriculum that we use in our early childhood classrooms that this is a way for us to take the ESL curriculum and align it with the gold objectives curriculum and therefore, you know, exponentially grow the information that is given both to the parent and the child, and then they can have a conversation with each other about the things they're learning and maybe even learning the same concepts at the same time. So our ESL staff, our coach or our instructor, are prepared and parallel the presentation that they may have in our ESL class with the gold objectives that are currently being covered in the early childhood education environment. And of course, these are focused on literacy, math, physical education, and social emotional education. And that shot is actually a shot of a dry erase board in our ESL classroom when they were going over gold objectives in our ESL class. So the next slide is one of my favorites. This is a story about a mother that's a parent in our Career Advanced program. She's a recent graduate. She is a mother of 5 children that are all enrolled in one of our early childhood centers here at CAP. They were enrolled and ended and graduated in varying stages. I think her first child did not attend CAP, but the other 4 all did. She began with us not only with her child in an early childhood site, but then she also began as a CNA or certified nurse aide student in 2009. Then she went on in 2010 to 2012 to complete her LPN at Tulsa Technology Center, and then went on to our registered nursing program in the winter of and finished that in the winter of 2014. So as you can see, it took about 5 years. So her family was able to receive services that were parallel to those that her children were receiving in the early childhood environment, in addition to the fact that she was able to complete certifications that now allow her to work full-time as a registered nurse in a local large hospital here at about $27 an hour. And that was actually her starting wage. We followed up with her a couple of months ago at an event, and we are aware that she's received a raise, and unfortunately I can't remember what it was off the top of my head, but it was very sizable, so she's doing very, very well. The last 2 slides that I have go over the research component. This is how we know that what we're doing, the program that we're delivering, is going to have or has the results that we need it to have. And this is what's going to allow us to be able to replicate those programs into other organizations and continue to serve in this 2-generation format that we have found so valuable. Our first study is the CAP Family Life Study, which we ended enrollment into this study back in fall of 2014. So we've completed participant enrollment into the program, but data collection continues and evaluating that data and then compiling reports that are available, as you can see at that link, That's our captulsa.org website. You can click on the Innovation Lab tab. And then both our Family Life Study and the study I'll tell you about in a second are available there, including our most updated reports that we have from those studies. And then the last one, at least that we're doing right now, because we have a couple more on the table that are brand new, is our CAP Family Advancement Study, and participants are still going into this program. This one is a randomized control trial, where the other one is a comparison group. So we have 150 program participants that will be enrolled in the CAP Family Advancement Study, and then 150 that are in the control group. And those were enrolled over the last 3 years. Our last group, I think, is spring 2017 for that specific study. And we are one of only 4 Head Start 2Gen studies in the country that have this specific study going on that looks at the impact of 2-generation programs in this specific way. That's through a partnership with Northwestern University and Oklahoma State University. And again, you can see the link there at our Innovation Lab tab on our CAP Tulsa website, and you can get more information about our most updated findings there. And so that completes the portion I have for CAP Tulsa. And I am going to turn it over to Dwayne Yoder and Paige Teagarden with Garrett County Community Action, and they'll tell you a little bit about their program.
Well, Kayleen, thank you very much, and Monica and Tiffany also, thank you for the introductions. I'm going to talk a little bit about, what our experience has been in Garrett County, Maryland. And for those of you who have heard me before, I apologize. It is the story that we've told a couple times at the various community action conferences. And I also would want to say that as we go through this, I'm not going to be showing many of the tools that we actually use, but you can be, we were pretty free with sharing those. And if you have any interest in it, you can contact either Paige or I, and I think we can probably get them to you. And finally, before I get into the presentation itself, I want to call out Paige Teagarden somewhat. She's a bit under the weather, and so she keeps losing her voice. But most of you who know our work here in Garrett County know that Paige has provided a lot of leadership, and it points out to me the importance of having a person who is doing strategic work or innovations work like Monica did at Tulsa, CAP Tulsa, to really making this work well, and that certainly was our experience. Monica mentioned that this takes some time, and this is a timeline that you're looking at right now in terms of Garrett County's experience. And you can see that from where we started, which was really more involving a strategic plan, to where we are today, is really about a 6 or 7 years going on it now. But I do want to say that don't be scared off by that. We're a small agency. We don't have a lot of resources, and a lot of what happened was about learning as we went. And so the process was somewhat convoluted at times. We had to make some changes. It just took time because we didn't have the capacity to implement really quickly. And I also, before we get into some of this, just want to mention that one of the things that was really helpful, we talked to other community action agencies and some other organizations as we started and went along. And we had, for instance, Chautauqua Opportunities in New York. We spent a day and a half, 2 days maybe, with them. And they had done a lot of work with services integration. So I just point out that there are a lot of colleagues in our network who can be very helpful. But if you look at this chart here, you can see that we started really in terms of our process with a strategic plan in about 2009, and it took us about 2 years to get through a process where we could look at what we wanted to do with our basic mission, which was really creating greater economic security and improving the independence of some of the elderly and disabled. But the economic security mission was the driver. And so we ended up spending a full year just testing ideas through what we call a pilot project, where we work very intensely with a dozen families to test ideas. And then we went from there into just the creating the, the implementing the staff changes, the organizational changes, and designing, developing, and implementing the technology that was necessary. And then probably about a year in which we started building stronger relationships around the 2G approach with our external partners. And, finally now we're at a position where we're beginning to really look carefully at the outcomes and the data that is resulting from this. So that's kind of giving you a timeline in terms of how this went for us as a single county community action agency. It's probably pretty important to at least establish a little bit of context in terms of Garrett County community action. We're rural, and we're really rural, and and we're part of Central Appalachia. So we only have 30,000 people in our county, so much of what our design looks like reflects, I think, that mountain and that rural culture that we were coming from. I also want to note that, when you look at the two-generation families that we work with, and you look at the economy of Garrett County, a lot of that is about working poor. They're employed, but aren't making large incomes, and we really do lack career opportunities and career ladders in Garrett County. Our participants on your right there in that column, I'm not going to go over that data, but you can note that Garrett County Community Action serves well over half the population in Garrett County in one form or the other. So that's fairly significant. The other piece that we spend a lot of time on that I'm not going to talk about very much, but we are very active in community development and housing development and developing community facilities and some economic development work. This slide here really is an attempt to catch where participants who come through our doors, what the service category or the program category is that they are involved in. And you can see here that the largest portion of the persons who come through our door, and these people here, these counts, these numbers here, would be duplicates because one person may have more than one service, obviously. But the large portion here is what we call our stabilization services. And that would be things like energy assistance, Section 8 tenant rental assistance, emergency assistance, homeless prevention. Those would all be stabilization services. But one of the things that's interesting about this slide is that very similar to many community action agencies, we have multiple programs. And one of the things that Monica mentioned is that it's important to have quality services, quality programs when you get into this. And so that very much is our experience also. But it is a reflection that we had a large portfolio of services as we got started with 2G. To kind of go through the process now in terms of how this developed for us, as I mentioned, we started really with a strategic planning process, which was a very broad, general kind of process. But we decided from the very beginning that what we wanted to focus on was economic security and independent living. And this led us to look at creating an integration strategy of what we were doing within community action. This strategic plan was really the foundation for the two-generation work that we ended up doing, later. The other thing that we identified as we went through this process was that we had a very high-performing early childhood education program. Our school readiness scores and data were really astounding in terms of the progress that we had made. And so we started this process with a solid early childhood education foundation. And I mentioned that we had a portfolio of services that allowed us to build in bundle services around, where families were. we also had in Garrett County, I think, a culture of collaboration. And we had partners who were interested in working with us from the very beginning. What we also found out, however, was that our staff really felt uncomfortable with doing financial coaching, doing any kind of financial education. And so we felt that that was a very key piece to both the services integration that we wanted to do with all our families as well as our two-generation families. We also discovered, not too surprisingly, is that Garrett County Community Action, with all its programs, had its own silos. We did programs well. We knew how to get people a service, but they had their own silos. A staff person worked for Section 8 rental assistance, so they worked for the finance office. They worked for Head Start. They didn't look and focus on the mission and the purpose-driven kinds of outcomes that we wanted. Finally, in Garrett County, there was also a lack of a robust career advancement and career ladder, career coaching program in the community. Garrett County Community Action did not provide that service at all, and many of our partners didn't have a very energetic piece. The other thing that really started getting us moving toward 2G was that as we got into the services integration strategic planning, we had the support of, in particular, the Annie Casey Foundation, who initially invited us to get involved with the two-generation initiative. And as that evolved, the Aspen Institute, through its Ascend initiative, also became a key partner and a key encouragement to us as we went along. So our frame basically is that we start with stabilizing persons in crisis, and we do this through a bundling of services, crisis intervention, and we invite all the families we work with to create a pathway plan that maps out where they want to be. We have developed within our agency we work very hard to embed financial literacy through a coaching technique with all our coordinators, all the people who have direct contact on our frontline staff who work with families directly. That was a year-long process of training, and it continues on an ongoing basis because there's constant turnover. We found that we had to find partners and find a means to involve our partners in a education and in career advancement program, and so that was another large, long process that we ended up changing because of where we were and because of our interest in our two-generation work. We spent some time, and I mentioned and talked about the community development work. I'm going to basically skip over that, but it's important in the sense that it gave us access to some resources that we otherwise wouldn't have had. So if there was a stabilization activity around housing, the fact that we owned and managed 600 housing units, rental units, allowed us to make some, get people into housing, for example, that otherwise we would have had to spend a lot of time building up partnerships with and probably would have slowed the process. For those of you who've heard the Garrett County story, you know that part of what we ended up having to do was really spending some time on changing our organization culture and structure. And so what we ended up trying to do is we focused initially on creating, changing our organizational structure along our strategic objectives that we had defined in our strategic plan. We talked about creating staff or position descriptions and work plans that reflected our strategic outcomes as opposed to our program outcomes. And we started developing reports on outcomes for families that looked at, what what was an outcome as opposed to an output. And many of you have heard that kind of a conversation as we get into the Roma Next Generation and the what we were working on under Roma before. But that part and the organizational structure part was something that involved a lot of work, and we ended up, just as an example, deciding that we had to change every job description we had in the agency. We used to have Head Start teachers, or we used to have loan underwriters, or we used to have van drivers. And we ended up going with generic job descriptions such as contract managers, data quality control managers, or content specialists, coordinators. And the idea there was to say, you don't work for a program, you don't work for a department. You are an important piece to the agency's mission and what we want to see the outcomes to become. The other thing that we worked at initially is that we did infuse coaching practices and financial education knowledge for all our frontline staff. And that also was something that we tried to work with our partners, with external partners, so that their staff would pick up those skills. And we found out that one of the things that was important in that process was that the coordinators, our frontline staff, the people who did the intake, the people who met with families and developed the pathway plans, needed some special support. And so we set up and we organized and made sure that coordinators had the opportunity to meet among themselves, to meet one-on-one with coaching experts, people who could teach coaching techniques. There was tremendous pressure in terms of a new way of doing business for coordinators. They were engaged with families in ways that they hadn't been before. So and one of the things that we picked up from Chautauqua and when we were in New York was that we really needed a manager who could work across all departments and work directly with coordinators to help facilitate that process. And I think that's one of the important things that we learned as we asked our coordinators, who were our frontline staff, to take on this added responsibility and this ability to build relationships with families that they were working with in a new way, in a way that they had not been doing before. We spent a lot of time developing, these committees, cross-department committees, and interdepartmental task forces that were focused on family needs. There are about 10 working committees that meet regularly in Garrett County now who are focused in various aspects of this work. The integration of services, which is what 2G is built on, starts with an agency-wide intake. It's one intake, no wrong door. It happens anytime anyone walks into our organization. And when that happens, there is an initial family assessment done. Family works with the coordinator to do an assessment based on a scale, what we call a Crisis to Thrive scale. And that identifies where they think they are in about 10 different dimensions, and is the basis for creating a pathway plan which establishes goals, objectives, and action plans that the family wants to work with. These are all electronic, and they're built into a central database so that any time a family comes back into the agency through any of its doors, any of its programs, it can be updated by whoever the coordinator is who's working with that family or talking to that family at that point in time. The information system, this is something that every agency, I think, who ends up getting into this 2G work and services integration strategy will have to deal with, and we find that it was one of the key components. So we do have a central database that is accessible to everyone and every worker in Garrett County Community Action, and it does operate, or there is some interoperability with other systems. That's something we're still trying to improve on because there are some systems that don't cooperate very well. But we're making great progress with that, and there's a lot of interest both in the state and the federal level to improve on that. The other thing that was very critical is that we spent a lot of time looking at the data we were putting in the system. It has to be high quality, and there are a lot of different techniques that we use to try to make sure that that happened. Our partnerships, and these partners were also a part of this data collection, were the home visiting program through our local health department, which is, and they use a Healthy Families model. And the career ladder partnerships were developed with our community college. They've become a very, very important partner and have picked up, are very enthusiastic about this. In fact, they are the applicant to the Department of Labor for the Department of Labor grant that is focusing largely on two-generation strategies. So I should also just say that, you know, for two-generation, we used Head Start as the beginning point. These were families with young children, so early Head Start and regular Head Start were the basis for this. And we have about 300 families who were in our two-generation initiative. That isn't to say that we don't do this services integration with all the families that are coming through our doors. And as families graduate from Head Start, they're picked up by some of our other workers. But Head Start, in this case, has been the cornerstone, perhaps, of you know, our two-generation work. So this slide talks a little bit about what this looks like for us as a community. And I'm not going to go through it because I'm going to run out of time here. But as you can see, we have different elements here that are looking at what I guess you could almost call our theory of change, going from our intense work around basic budgeting, parent education, early childhood program to the outer circle, which is the career work, career advancement work, the stabilization services, the financial management, and the additional mentoring and support services that we provide. But what makes it possible and what ties it really together is the ability to have a staff that's trained and to have a data system and data capacity that can really track this. And so that this slide attempts to kind of tie all of that together in one picture. So where we are now in the operational aspects, I should maybe just talk a little bit about the funding, since I talked about the tracking and the reporting and the factors that kind of shape our initiative before. Like Monica mentioned, it's more of an approach. I mean, generally we don't have any two-generation program. It's not separate, not a separate funding stream. But we've changed the way our existing programs work, and that's what we have tried to emphasize. We have had some outside support from foundations, and you know, we're very optimistic about the future, that there will be some resources that will come down the road. And I know that some people who have been a part of this webinar have worked hard on making some of those resources available at the federal level, and I think that will happen. But to date, most of our outside money, dedicated money for two-generation work has been foundation work. But that isn't to say that you can't move forward using your existing services. And I think that is something that I would really emphasize, that even if it's a slow process, you need to start somewhere, and that's something that you control and you can manage. And from the perspective of the families, just in terms of the families themselves, you know, this is what the families experience. They can come into any door. When they come in and we do the initial intake for them, we can, and then when we see their assessment and their pathway plan, we can bundle services and we can say, we think you're eligible for these services, and these services will probably help you achieve the goals that you have in your pathway plan. And that's done automatically. That's done without adding any additional trips or filling out any additional paper. And so that's what we call bundling of services. The bundling of services around where that family is and what their interest is. And so we go from an intake to an assessment to a pathway plan that is tracked regularly and is a part of our discussion, ongoing discussion with each family. Families are very engaged in that process. So that family engagement with respect to where they are is one of the central parts of our two-generation work. We have, because families come in for all these different program services, we pretty much have an ongoing contact with them in one form or the other. It is something that allows us to work with families after Head Start. But we see families pretty regularly as this process unfolds. So one of the things that people wonder about and is, you know, has this actually made a difference? And Paige, who has been, I think, Paige, are you able to do any talking, or can I move forward? Or do you want me to move forward with these charts?
I think I can talk some.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. So just in terms of where we are now with results, I'm going to tell a very, very quick story about one of our families in Head Start, early Head Start, whose mom was unemployed, actually wasn't even looking for work for a while, who ended up getting a CNA. The father was also like underemployed. I think he had a job at McDonald's or something like that. And he didn't really buy that this work that we were doing was going to help much. But after she got her CNA, he ended up going and getting a commercial driver's license to drive a truck with support from Garrett County Community Action. So now both of those are employed. Their child is actually doing really well in school, and they are now working on a goal of purchasing a home. So that's just sort of the personal side behind some of the stats. On this particular one, if you look at the black lines, those are pre-2-gen. So before our two-generation approach, what did our data show in terms of Head Start and early Head Start families improving in certain dimensions? And so these are the dimensions on a crisis to thriving scale. Those of you who are Roma trainers, this is very familiar to you. But you can look at like financial management, that first one on the left, and before 2-gen, we had almost no families showing improvement in that area. And the same is true for sort of credit building, asset building, community involvement. None of those had much improvement. And now you can see the sort of orange, gray, and yellow lines are the last several years, with the yellow line being this year not yet complete, that we've got improvements in all of those areas. And we expect to continue to see this year's numbers go up. They're doing their last round of visits before I pulled this chart. Go to the next slide. So you could also say, Dwayne, can you push forward on the slide?
Well, I'm trying. Yeah, I'm trying to make it. There it goes. I had to hit it 3 times.
Okay. All right. So there are two ways. One is that they're improving on the crisis to thriving scale. Another is, well, maybe they were all already really highly rated to begin with. So this slide is about those who rated themselves as 7 or higher on each of the dimensions. And again, the black line is the pre-2-gen, and the other lines are the last several years with the incomplete year. And again, in every case, you're seeing improvements in the number of families who rated themselves at 7 or higher at some point during the year in one of these dimensions. And in most cases, these would be towards the end of the year. Go ahead and flip forward. So this is, we were not tracking these kinds of outcomes and benchmarks before 2G, so I can't speak to the pre, except to say that we know we had 3 families, 3 parents registered for certification classes pre-2G, and we're already this year at 17. Last year we had more than that by the end of the year, and so you can just a lot more interest on the financial aspects and the job and career aspects that we're now focusing on. Go ahead. We are seeing an improvement in income. I won't go into a great deal of detail here, but 37% have showed an increase of greater than $500 over the past couple of years, which is great. Next. And this is one slide where we're really bringing together the data of children and parents and family. So fully ready, meaning the child was rated as fully ready for kindergarten. And you can see that the families had sort of an average score of 5 or higher on the Crisis to Thriving scale. And you'll see the dark line is the 5 or greater, and the sort of lighter blue line is less than 5. And it's sort of what you would expect, right? The higher on the fully ready, the higher they are in the family. The lower the income, the more needs they're going to have, so flipped. Two-parent families, higher on doing better on Crisis to Thrive. This isn't shown here, but we're also starting to play around with what we call a composite family wellness score, which is a combination of 10 dimensions on Crisis to Thrive. And so the total possible score is 100. And then we're looking at average, that average composite across different levels of child readiness. And we are seeing a correlation between those, but more importantly for our purposes, it gives us a number to watch to see if over time, over the course of the year, we're seeing an increase in that average. So I think with that, I'll turn it over to questions, unless, Dwayne, do you have other comments?
Well, no.
Oh, yeah.
I think right. There's a poll here, similar to what we did before, and so there you see it. What is the existing platform? What existing platform would your agency likely use to begin a two-generation model? I think one of the points with all this is that there are many beginning points for this. There's no right or wrong answer, but there is a sense that Head Start, because we're so familiar with community action, tends to be the one. But there are other areas that work as well.
Okay, so the poll has closed, and in just a moment, we'll provide you with the results. And Dwayne, are you able to see the results from the poll?
Yeah. I mean, as we would expect, Head Start and Early Head Start are the big drivers, and then there's a scattering of others from 3 for employment, financial literacy, child care. So, and Tiffany, that's essentially, I mean, that's Garrett's report.
Thank you very much. So thank you again to Garrett as well as the CAP Tulsa for sharing such wonderful details related to your two-generation approach strategy that your agencies. I want to refer back to Monica for a moment because Monica wanted to make a couple of comments. Monica?
Yeah, thanks, Tiffany. So the first comment is we had a question or a participant ask about the CAP Family Success Plan. And because there's been a little bit of interest in that from among rural impact sites and others, I've asked CAP Tulsa to actually post the tool to our website. So I don't think that it's been posted yet, but maybe Kayleen, you could sort of nudge that along. I think Brandy's working on that, and so everyone would be able to go to captulsa.org and see that Family Success Plan. And, you know, we shamelessly borrowed both from Garrett's Crisis to Thrive scale and other similar scale tools, so we're happy for you to borrow from that. The second thing I want to say is, I think especially pertinent to this audience, the Office of Community Services is working on an information memorandum about CSBG and 2Gen. And when you think about it, so this IM should come out within the next month, hopefully, but when you think about it, and when Dwayne was talking about resources, this occurred to me, there's really a lot of flexibility in CSBG money to support a two-generation approach. And I think at the state level, if there are any state folks on the line, you know, you have your discretionary pot, which may seem kind of small, but you can support training, you can support coordination of services, you can do sort of competitive grant-based projects for 2Gen. And then at the community level, you know, so you can really utilize your community assessment and community plan development process as a way to bring partners together and have that conversation through a 2Gen lens. So you really can support that conversation through activities you're already supposed to be doing. But then, you know, community actions, as long as your plan sort of justifies it, you can sort of help support some of the 2Gen efforts. So it might be direct services that you support with CSBG money. It might be the role of someone like, you know, a person at an innovation lab, or a person like Paige who does sort of strategy and 2Gen thinking. So I think, you know, you can sort of really think about how you use existing resources to make this approach come to life.
Thank you very much, Monica. And it looks like there was this one other question that we see here, and certainly you all have spoken about it, but is it possible for each of you to talk a little bit more about barriers that you experienced on the programmatic level as you were implementing your projects or your approaches, and how you overcame those barriers?
Well, this is Dwayne. You know, starting, the technology and the data systems are a barrier, and that's an ongoing barrier. To share information between different programs, different funders, was an issue, and it's still a work in progress. But I think you know, there's some interest in trying to change that. The funding streams are always something, but I've found in the last year and a half actually, that the funding streams themselves, the funders themselves are not as big a barrier as they used to be. They try to work through this because they understand what the goal is. But I think the silos that are created by grants and by the way data and information is shared or not shared were two big ones, and then our own people and changing our own people's attitude about what the work they were doing.
Thank you very much, Dwayne. And Monica, Kayleen is having some technical difficulty on CAP Tulsa's side. Would you mind speaking to that a little bit from your perspective?
Sure, no problem. I would agree with Dwayne on the data components. I think the data challenge is not insignificant, and we considered ourselves pretty savvy at CAP Tulsa with data. We had a pretty highly developed early childhood data system, and I think many Head Starts do and will. But that data system is going to be very focused on responding to Head Start requirements and PIR type information. And once you start bringing a two-generation lens, those systems are just not quite built for that kind of perspective. On the adult side, we started, with a couple spreadsheets that turned into what probably felt like a couple million spreadsheets until we finally found and actually ended up purchasing a data system called Efforts to Outcomes. Some of you may be familiar with that. And with, actually quite a bit of additional work massaging that system, we're now really able to kind of do some of the reports similar to what Paige walked you through and kind of look at child and parent outcomes and progress on our family success plan together. And I would say the other one, and Dwayne alluded to it, the organizational change is really, getting everyone on board with a two-gen approach. I mean, it's very natural that Head Start teachers are first and foremost concerned about what they're doing in the classroom with that child, and they, take sort of different approaches about if the parent is maybe kind of on board with that project or not. And so getting them to really think about the parents and the parents' role in supporting the parents, especially across a big system like CAP Tulsa's, is difficult. And on the same side, our career coaches are first and foremost concerned about the progress of their adult students and sort of continuing to help them think about how those parents are, those students are actually parents, and what that means for the child is kind of ongoing work as well.
Thank you very much, Monica.
Can I add one thing, Tiffany, real quick?
Thank you.
So just to why Monica and Dwayne both flagged the data component is because in order to see the whole family together, to see what you're doing with parents, different parents, and different children, you have to be able to see all of that information in order to manage it well, to manage the family's progress well, to help point them towards appropriate resources, to help the staff know what's going on. And so that's why the data component gets sort of raised up, because it's so diverse in terms of the amount and types of information that are necessary to be seen at the same time. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Paige. That is just a very profound statement, and really a statement that we as a network need to continue to reflect upon and really tap into some viable resources that will support that, such that as it relates to either the two-gen approach or just bundling services in general, one, we're able to sort of tell that comprehensive story of impact. But what you said was, even as you're engaged in that that service or service delivery moment with that family, you're able to do that in a more holistic and effective and efficient manner. And so that is a notion that we absolutely need to kind of keep on our radar. The other thing as we prepare to close today is please pay attention to the topics that are coming out from the Learning Communities Resource Center, particularly as it relates to this whole notion of two-gen. This is not extracurricular conversation for our network. This is really about us making really meaningful impact, more meaningful impact on the families and communities that we're serving on a daily basis. We are in the anti-poverty business, and we want to fight that poverty more effectively, and certainly this approach has proven itself to be one that helps us to improve those outcomes. And at the end of the day, we might say that we're community action and we are the experts as it relates to anti-poverty work, but maybe there are some other organizations that might say, well, we can do it better. Well, not exactly, and that is not exactly. If we continue to be proactive, if we continue to be innovative and to create and engage in approaches such as this so that we might elevate stability for those families that we connect with on a daily basis. Very quickly, as we close out, we want to bring your attention to our next National Webinar Series presentation scheduled for April the 13th. We are excited that our partner, the National Alliance to End Homelessness, will be kicking off a series on decreasing family homelessness, and so if you're able to join us, we invite you to do so. Also, we want to bring your attention to another two-generation presentation that will be featured on April the 19th, presented by ICF, and they're going to primarily focus on the research related to 2Gen, and will release another publication for us that just lists just the various dimensions of 2Gen resources that are available to us as a network. And so this concludes our presentation today. Thank you again to our colleagues from CAP Tulsa as well as from Garrett, and they have been wonderful resources. As I said, we regard them as experts within our network, and if there's anything that you have a question about related to what has been discussed today, you see my contact information there, and our wonderful colleagues will help in any way that they can. We thank you again, and make it a great day. Bye-bye.